Good, okay, guys.
So for tonight and tonight only, I'm going to open the meeting. Roll call. Everybody's here except for Ann Brown. First item on the agenda is to elect a chair and vice chair. The roles of the chair is to preside over the meeting. The role of the vice chair is to fill in when the chair is not there. So with that, I'll leave it up to the planning commission.
I would like to nominate Scott Stensland for chair and John Brownlee for vice chair.
So is there a second? I mean, again, this is going to be up to you guys. Any discussion?
I think the combination of certainly Scott with some history on the planning commission, and then John joining us as a new member. I think that combination makes an awful lot of sense. So that was my thoughts for these two gentlemen.
Any other discussion? With that, and just by the way, for the new planning commission members, I'm kind of acting like a chair. This is kind of what the chair would do, and this is the only reason I'm doing this because there's no chair. So with that, all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. So chair and vice chair are
Thank
Scott
you,
and
Scott
John.
and John. We really appreciate that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Very good.
Do we have to?
Yeah, I'd rotate. It'd be great. Thank you. And if John Iverson, usually the chair will sit next to Scott.
All right,
Sorry, thanks.
no problem.
Should we have them move their
Yeah.
And does this role take place for 1 year from this
Yes.
point forward?
Good question. Yes, so you'll do this again next year.
This just got serious. So Pat, just to be clear, you've called the meeting to order.
Correct.
So the first thing on the agenda would be to approve the minutes from our last meeting, April 16th, 2019.
And Chair of the Planning Commission, we'd like to, staff pull that item and do a little tweaking of the minutes
Okay,
and bring it back to you for your next meeting.
okay. Do we need to move on that, or we'll just
Yeah, you don't need to take a motion on
anything
that.
that's that? Okay. So then, next item, we have 3 discussion items tonight. The first is a public hearing, the rezoning of Arbor Woods. Pat, you going to walk us through that?
Scott is, or Paul.
Paul?
Chair, Commission, thank you. Today I bring before you the action for establishing an ordinance for an update to the PUD that was done in Arbor Woods some time ago. For those that have been here for a little while, you might know this topic well because we've talked about the Arbor Woods discussion for some time, and it's a complicated and storied history, but I think we've come to a good solution. For those of you who are new, I'll go over the staff report so that everyone can get caught up. Excuse me. So Arbor Woods was approved on September 22nd, 2014 as Resolution 1475, a 15-lot subdivision. Staff was contacted by Mr. Donnelly, a potential purchaser of a home at Arbor Woods development. His question centered around the impervious surfaces allowed in that particular subdivision. staff informed them that the maximum impervious surface was 30% per the reference development spreadsheet that we have at our office for PUDs. After looking at this and going over additional questions, staff started investigating the issue of impervious surfaces for this development shortly afterwards. Staff was contacted by a Mr. Rick Parker, a land manager at Gonya Homes and Companies. Mr. Parker stated that the city had negotiated a matrix with the staff in 2016. Unfortunately, staff informed him that no such agreement was approved by City Council. Arbor Woods was approved by resolution, again 2014, as a rezone, final plat, and CUP by resolution. This set the impervious surface requirements for that at 25 or R zoning. However, staff report had made mention of a 30%. And so that's why the development spreadsheet suggested 30%. At some point afterwards, around 2016, the terms of the impervious surface maximum were administratively augmented to allow a per lot maximum of a set of square footage and a total development square footage to a percent maximum. Unfortunately, this was not approved or allowed. Staff held a community meeting with residents and the developer of the Arbor Woods development on March 19th of 2019. At this meeting, staff presented information related to the impervious surface question and presented possible solutions. Residents voiced their concerns and preferences. The majority of owners left comfortably increasing the impervious surface limit to 35% from 30, which is the standard for our R1 low-density residential district or your standard single-family home. The owner of 848 Arbor Woods was concerned that his house would not be or would be legal non-conforming structure and requested that his lot be allowed 40% or the 0.37% over what he currently has, based on that 2016 item. There's a timeline of Arbor Woods development shown below. It shows, I believe, 13 or 14 buildings and sort of the development that took place and when it happened. As you can see, at the 25%, a number of homes are over, but some are under. At the 30%, most are close to or meet. At 35%, which is being discussed tonight, they would be well underneath and then have a little bit that a normal homeowner would be expected or should expect to have. And then obviously the one additional item would be the 40%, which, as you see on the 4416 at 848 Arbor Woods, at 39.63% would be the one accommodation. Staff recommendation. Staff recommends approval of an ordinance establishing a PUD-1 district corresponding to the R-1 low-density residential district for Arbor Woods development, with impervious surface limits of 35% in all lots except Block 1, Lot 7. Block 1, Lot 7 impervious maximum shall be 40%. Including your attachments are the proposed ordinance PUD, which rectifies the issue that we had with the original resolution. It's common practice to establish PUDs by ordinance and not resolution. So this basically gives more firm foundation for this this particular PUD that was already approved in 2014. An Arbor Woods map. In addition, a staff report excerpt from the 1913. And finally, the resolution that enabled the whole process back in 2014. I believe here's just some quick highlights that I went over. One thing to take a look at, because it's important to also see spatially what things look like. I've included a map just to get a better idea of what this looks like and how, for the most part, this looks like a standard subdivision that would fit within one of our R1 developments. You can see there's one home that's slightly larger. That would be our 39.6%, which is the reason why we're asking for the recommendation of 40% for this particular lot. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions you may have.
Which is the lot? Which is the one that's large? I see one that looks larger, but I'm not 100% sure I got the right one.
Right, the cursor is currently over the lot in question.
And this home has already been built,
That's a curse.
and then basically meets and exceeds, if I remember the discussion properly, the current ordinance, and without the expansion, he would be limited not to put a deck on or any further expansion. There's just been some confusion on this plat from the beginning.
In our original hope for this particular item, for this particular lot, is that without the exception, he'd be legal non-conforming. This would bring him to conforming status, and so the expectation when the individual bought the lot would bring the expectation back to reality. And so staff is also asking for a hearing on the matter as well.
For the new members, the existing panel has had a lot of discussion around this topic. There's some decisions that were made, I believe, in 2014 that kind of brought us where we're at. We talked a little bit to Mayor Funk earlier about straight zoning, PUDs, and as we move more towards straight zoning and zoning by right, it'll eliminate some of this stuff. There's just to enlighten some of you that are coming new to the, so there's some sort of magical spreadsheet and formulation that brought us to where we're at. And where do you go with that? How do you make it fair and equitable, which brings us to where we're at right now? Is that fair?
So
I would say so.
There'd be 35% on all the lots but one.
Correct.
One would be 40%, correct?
Correct.
So if a homeowner comes later and says, well, I'm at 28, but I want to do something, and is there, are we going to modify each one as they might come, or is this it?
So 35% would set the standard. So for example, if for whatever reason in the future, this person who owns this lot wants to go above and beyond the 35%, and they would usually apply for a variance in that case, in which case they would have to show the merit of the variance and satisfy the four-point credentials for establishing a variance for that particular issue, and we would handle it at that time. But for many of these lots, the 35% would provide for most activities that a normal homeowner would do.
And again, third, I think R1 standard is 35% impervious.
That's correct.
A bit more to the straight zoning and zoning by right, or building development by right.
Correct.
So just one question, is it reasonable to consider just 40% for the entire development then, since one lot has 40% and the rest would be 35?
Well, I think the thought process behind doing the 35% is that there's a rationality behind it as far as most single-family dwelling units are 35%. 40%, you're starting into the R2 developments, which are like your express homes, your villas, detached townhomes. And these particular lots, this particular development wasn't designed with that in mind. It was designed with the single-family home in mind. And so that's why with the community meeting, as well as some background, that felt like it was the best and rationally the best.
The other thing is, see in their third item on a hardcover, one of the purpose why you have a maximum hardcover is just to reduce the amount of stormwater runoff. This is right next to the wetlands, and it was approved at 30%. We're recommending increasing the amount of hardcover to help with the homeowners, but not to the degree of 40%, which everybody would be able to increase hardcover and have more runoff to the wetlands.
Any other discussion? Remember when we discussed this last time, that seemed to be a pretty reasonable number, I mean, considering where we're at with this. So if there's no more discussion, we'll open this up for a public hearing. Do I need a motion to open that?
Nope.
Just to close it? Okay. So if anybody wants to share some comments with us, this is your time to do that. We invite you to just step up to the podium, give your name and your address, and we'd like to hear your thoughts.
So I'm Doug Felland. I'm the guy that lives in Lot 7, 40%er. Potential 40%er.
Sorry.
Overachiever.
Your address?
I'm 848 Arbor Woods Road,
Thanks.
Victoria. So when I moved in, there was one home in the development. It was the model home, first lot on the right. So there was 14 lots available. Designed a custom home with Gagne and picked this lot. And none of this was ever discussed or disclosed with me. And the first I heard of it was about a month ago. So obviously build a brand new home and a brand new development. I would hope that this passes and I get the exception, because to have a brand new home that's legal but non-conforming is not really good if you ever want to sell it. And obviously, if it goes to 40, I'm not going to have any expansion of any hard surface. So I'm going to be a little hamstrung. So, but like I said, none of this was disclosed. So this house could have easily fit in another lot, and I could have picked another lot, but I never knew anything about it. So just wanted to go on the record that our particular situation, my wife and I. So I appreciate the committee's decision on this, and I hope it goes through. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Terry Schwarting, 824 Arbor Woods. And I just want to say, as another resident of the Arbor Woods, we think that this is a good solution for the city and the residents of the Arbor Woods development. So we hope you approve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going once, going twice. So I'm move that we would close the public forum. Do I have a second?
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 Okay, so we'll close the public forum, and now,
You got a vote on the,
oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none?
That was a vote for closing the public comment.
Closing the
Correct.
public comment, correct. So we will close the public comment. We'll open it back up for comments amongst ourselves.
I think we, collectively as a group, we've had a lot of discussion around this topic, and decisions are made well before any of our time that put us in a weird situation, both politically and publicly, and how do we best serve our residents. And I think collectively as a group, we've come with a pretty fair solution, and I think our public here feels the same way. I think, I believe it's a go.
Yeah, I agree.
I do have a question. Can staff explain how there was confusion of a PUD versus an R1, and how this kind of this issue fell through the cracks between the two zoning?
So that's a good question. I mean, and trying to speak to other folks in the past, because people make different decisions. But I think at the time there was transition, and so the staff was turning over. We had some interim folks that were here as well, and so I think knowledge of our process at the time maybe didn't go through quite the way it should have. I think there was a lot of intentions. So, for example, I think the intent was 30% originally, but since it was never included in the PUD, it had to be in 25%. I think it's hard to infer a lot out of that, but I think it's important that what we're doing now is to rectify that and to come to a conclusion. Thank you.
Just curious, what are the side setbacks for these lots?
I believe it's 10-foot side, 20 total, so you have to have 10 and minimum was the 20 total.
There's not a setback issue with that same. I'm just looking at the picture. The setbacks are fine. It's just the coverage, right?
Right. The original design of the plan when it was submitted through the survey didn't show any issues with setbacks. It was just the impervious surface, and so it's 10 foot on each side with a total minimum of 20 total, 30 in the rear and 25 in the front, which is also highlighted in the PUD update as well. Although from space it does look a little narrow, but
a lot of times the property lines aren't totally accurate on this.
Any other questions? Comments?
Do we have language?
The motion would be a motion to approve an ordinance establishing PUD-1 Arbor Woods to set R1 residential standards and allow for 35% impervious surface coverage on all lots except Block 1, Lot 7, where Block 1, Lot 7 impervious surface shall be 40%.
I will make a motion to duplicate what Paul just said, because I don't have it in front of me.
Do we have a second?
Second?
Did you get the second?
I got Iverson, second, right?
Yes.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This goes to the city council at their next meeting on Monday.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys have a good evening. I can, I have a bandwidth load here tonight.
Okay, so next week looks like we have the final plat, Lake Town 12 edition.
Chair, members of the Planning Commission, on November 13th, 2018, last year, the City Council approved the rezoning to a PUD and preliminary plat for the Vassar development. That was the name of it at that time. The developer was Terry Hartman. He since sold that property to Lennar Corporation. Tonight, the Lennar Corporation is requesting a final plat of the development. Again, the purpose of reviewing the final plat is to make sure it's consistent with the preliminary plat prior to recording in the county. The final plat has the same number of lots as the preliminary plat, but as mentioned in the staff report, some of the lot dimensions have changed. Where's my maps on this thing? Hang on a second. I gotta find this.
Box is back.
Get to see my file organization. So preliminary plat is shown in front of you, and there they had 56-foot wide lots. And outlot C is the protected woods, and there is a 40 feet distance minimum between those lots and then the county right-of-way. County Road 11 is here on the east side. Bridle Way would come down, and then what is now Saddleback Court.
Lodge Court?
What's that?
Lodge Court?
Yeah, they changed the name to Saddleback is the cul-de-sac. So, and then that was the preliminary plat that was approved. And then the final plat, you see, is here. The outlot C has shrunk. These have increased from the 50 feet to 56 feet. Saddleback Circle is the name. And then this outlot has shrunk. So what staff is recommending is that the final plat be a recommended approval, but that between now and the city council review, is that the final plat be revised. Increase the size of lot 1, block 3, to ensure the retaining wall is located on a private property, and that is this lot here on the northwest corner of the development. Lengthen lots 1 to 4, block 3, these 4. Again, to ensure that there's a retaining wall in the back. We want to make sure that those retaining walls are all on private property, not public property, so we're not responsible, the city's not responsible for maintaining those retaining walls.
Question that, Pat, so right now, is that part of the outlot?
Right.
You're asking to lengthen, so
Correct. So we'd remove that from the outlot, but they still have to preserve the trees there. But there is a retaining wall that runs the length of that, and it kind of goes back and forth, and we want to make sure it's just all on private property.
makes sense.
The other thing that the staff and the applicant are working out is that the applicant, Lennar Corporation, and Paul Damone is here representing Lennar, but they also own the property to the south, and they're planning on developing it, and they're going to have a regional stormwater pond to the property to the south, and then there's also this pond that's in Outlot B. There's 2 different water districts for both of these. This one is served by Carver County Water District, and then the property to the south is regulated by the Minnetonka Creek Watershed District. So what we'd like to see is the one retaining pond serve both developments as opposed to 2 separate ponds. And that's something we'd like to work out between now and when this goes to the final plat to the city council. Another condition is that they move property lines of lot 10, block 2, which is right here in the cursor. Because right now the sidewalk, if you overlay the sidewalk, it goes into the lot. We want to make sure the sidewalk is in the city's right of way, so it's city property. And so they're going to have to make some changes to that.
I was looking for the cursor.
Over here, comes through around. There's another drawing that depicts the sidewalk.
Yeah, right now the sidewalk, most of the sidewalk is in the right of way, and then it cuts that corner into the lot 10. Another one is that we want like this outlot A to be increased, so it's a minimum of 40 feet. Keep the lot widths along Saddleback Circle to 56 feet.
Pat, what's outlot A that needs to be increased? Oh, this.
So outlot A it's a trail. It's the trail that runs on the west side of County Road 11. And it's also to provide a buffer. You see a lot of the developments in Victoria have these large berms. Unfortunately, because of the way 8th edition was platted, it doesn't give you enough space to provide a large berm. But what the developer did was provide as much of a berm as possible within that 40 feet. Keep the lot widths along Saddleback Circle to 56 feet, which is consistent with the approved preliminary plat, which also will increase the size of Outlot C and preserves more of the existing significant trees. And then lastly, what the changes are is staff is suggesting is that they preserve more trees, outside plantings be approved by the city, or a cash in lieu of payment equal to $100 per caliber inch or some combination thereof. We believe that we can work with the developer to come up with these changes before it goes to the city council for their final review. With that, I'll take any questions.
Can you shed some more light on the issue with the trees? Your phrase in your notes were that it was disappointing, and so the change in the trees. What you're recommending is that go back to the original. Could you just define that a little bit more in terms of where you are with the trees?
Sure. Essentially, the Outlot C has shrunk significantly.
And that's where the trees are that
Right.
would be taken out.
In Outlot C.
Right.
And the main reason for that is that each one of these lots have increased essentially a good foot. So when you increase, that's 10 feet that they move the outlot in, that they're removing significant trees. So that's one of the things we want to make sure that the lots are consistent with what was approved in the preliminary plat, which will increase the size of Outlot C, which will increase the number of trees that are being preserved.
How many mature trees are throughout, call it A and B? Well,
Well, there are no mature trees in Outlot A's and B's. Outlot B is for the stormwater retention pond, and Outlot A is for the public trail.
okay.
All the significant trees,
On the west side there.
where's the? Landscaping plans right there. Yeah. For the aerial plan. Location map. So here's the location map, and you can see that all the significant trees are on the west side of the property. There's virtually none on the south side or along County Road 11.
Is that western portion partially wet?
It's not partially wet. But it is the low point. So if you walk back there, it's wet, but it's not a wetland
Okay.
because of the water naturally drains down there. That's one of the reasons why they're going to have a retaining pond back in that area.
So Pat, just so I understand, so you are recommending basically all those homes to the north of the new Saddleback go back to the widths that we approved on the preliminary plat?
So it's not even the ones on the north, it's also the ones on
Both sides, actually. Yeah,
Correct, yep.
Both sides.
Right.
So we're gonna get back Outlot C, which is what we approved in that preliminary plat.
Correct.
With the tree. Well, so what's the discrepancy, if we get back there, what's the discrepancy on the trees?
It's tough to figure out without having the plat in front of us, it's tough to figure out what the discrepancy is, but it's about a good 10-15% increase in the number of significant trees that will be preserved, saved.
Has the tree inventory been done?
Yes, yep. And that's how we came up with that figure that they'd have to pay over $300,000 if it was approved as is. So they did do a tree inventory, and we've calculated it. So that's one of the things the condition the staff was saying is that either they pay the $300,000 or they make some modifications, save more trees. That fee is going to lower, or some combination thereof, or they plant more trees. But I think the development is heavily planted already. They probably can't plant more trees. Public Works and Engineering remove some trees because they're in the drainage swales or in the pond areas.
You mean the trees they're going to plant?
Yeah.
And do the development, okay.
Right. So mostly what I foresee happening is that they increase the size of Outlot C, save more trees, and that's going to reduce their tree in lieu of fee. How much, I don't know. We'll have to work that out.
Yeah, I know, when we talked about this before, it's an appealing project for the city. I think we need homes like these. But part of what really stood out for me was that's a big berm of trees there, and we were preserving all that. And that's when I first saw that. That to me was like, what happened? How we lose all those trees? It was kind of shocking. So I definitely agree with, wanting to get that Outlot C as large as we can to save those trees. I still question. It worries me a little bit. There's still some ambiguity around how we're going to get to this number. A mixture. So we're going to mix it. We're going to pay a certain amount for this. I guess I'd almost like to see that before I start approving things. Because I'd rather have more trees than have some cash.
It's difficult to have the Planning Commission and City Council approve anything that's less than what the preliminary plat had already been approved.
I understand.
So if the preliminary plat was approved at 56-foot wide lots, it's very difficult to do anything less than that. So you're kind of,
But I think the question is,
the parameters have already been set.
Right.
So,
but you're going back to the preliminary plat, right? That would
Correct.
be-
Right.
That's what we'll end up voting on is going back to what the preliminary plat.
that is correct.
Right. It's gotta
Right.
be that.
And then whatever comes out of the outcome on the cost of the replacement, we can figure that out. But that's according to the ordinance, and it's pretty black and white.
Can you point out the 2 ponds versus 1? Can you point out where that plays out? Is that on the south property?
Right, so the Outlot B would be 1 pond. And then the second pond, we don't have plans for, but they are going to be coming in with preliminary plat at the Planning Commission meeting next month. So they're moving forward with it.
That's the same developer, right?
Right, Lennar. And we just got word from the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District and Carver County Conservation District earlier this week that they're willing to work together. So that's good news. So we don't foresee that being an issue as well.
There isn't currently a path that runs along the west side of the road there, right? That'd be a future right-of-way?
Well, there is a path north of this development, but it stops.
Can't quite see it here. It's
that's fine.
actually.
I believe you. Right.
Yeah, you need the whole map of Victoria. It won't show up on that.
There's a trail map here somewhere, if I remember right from this morning. Here. I don't know if there's one out here yet.
But there is a trail on Gun Road 11.
Yep.
Stops there. Again, part of this final plat is that developer installs sidewalks in front of the 2 homes on Bridle Way north of this. Because there'll be a sidewalk along Bridle Way here, but north of that, the sidewalk ends. And I think it was an oversight from the 8th edition. And then it's significant because there's a local school, and we want to make sure that all the sidewalk connections are just like trails. We want to make sure there's no missing gaps or teeth.
These houses are all on slab? There's no basements, or are there?
No, there are basements. Some have walkouts, some have full basements.
So they all,
But they're all one story though.
they're all one story with either a walkout or a full basement?
That is correct. The applicant's here in case you have any questions of.
I remember when
Them
we
as well.
first saw this plan, we really liked it because it did preserve a bunch of the trees.
Yeah.
That was a really appealing thing.
And it shrunk, I forget, you probably remember what the original number was, but it shrunk down a little bit to fit the space, and, but it changed a little bit on us. Maybe we can get some comments.
Sure. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. My name is Paul Tabone. I'm an entitlement manager with Lennar. So as you know, this project was approved, or the community was approved in November of 2018. Hartman Communities was the one that had the preliminary plat and brought it through the preliminary process, and we have purchased it since then. A couple of things that I wanted to clarify between then and now that have occurred. And one big thing that actually, because Pat called it out, we realized that we're using a different engineer. We have an engineer that has been with us in planning all of Lake Town pretty much since the beginning of it. So what happened was during the transfer of line work, CAD work, their engineer transferred the line work to our engineer, and we believe there was some inconsistencies in the line work. And when Pat brought this up last week, I started looking through it, and I was like, you know what? This is wrong. So I called our engineer and said, hey, which version of the line work did you get? And he told me, and I said, I'm not sure that that's consistent with the version of the plat that was approved in November. So let's double check that. Let's make sure that it's consistent. And so we've done that, and I think that's going to alleviate pretty much conditions 1 through 6. So it's a glitch in the line work. It happened during the file transfer. I didn't catch it, admittedly, because I just kind of moved into final design, final plat. But I think that's going to alleviate a lot of the concern for conditions 1 through 6. The other thing I wanted to note is we are going to double check the widths, are double checking the widths, and we will get updated lot sizes to staff. But one thing that we did catch on their line work, they rounded the lot sizes to the nearest foot, whereas our engineer carries it out a few decimal places. So like if you have a lot that may have been approved in the preliminary plat at 56 feet, and our engineer is showing it at like 56.5 or 56.75, it rounds up to the nearest foot from what was approved at the commission or at the council in November as opposed to carrying it out a couple of decimal places. So that may be a portion of the discrepancy, but we'll clean that up as well. I'm not too worried about it. And actually, because of the older line work, to staff's point, outlot A was diminished 10 feet. It should be 40. It will be 40. And then outlot C actually did not reflect the outlot size that was approved back in November. So that'll be adjusted as well. So my apologies on that one, but we're working to correct it, and we will continue to work with staff. And we believe that condition number 7 will be reworked as well, and the trees will likely be less in terms of impact. And it will more closely match the preliminary plat, which I pulled the tree removal plan from the preliminary plat, from the November approval that would have been approved by council. And it showed that there were 342 significant trees on site, and 193 of them were being proposed for removal. So we're going to be falling in line with those removals as well. So mostly just clean up, a lot of it generated by different set of line work that wasn't brought over properly into our CAD design and our final plat design. So I hope that helps, but we will continue to work through staff or with staff as we continue towards final plat. And our intention is to get an updated plan set to the city, I think Thursday or Friday of this week. So staff would be able to give it a quick look prior to council next week.
Question, if you don't mind. Is it possible that the encroachment on outlot C, encroaching the trees, could be because we added an extra lot that was on the preliminary plat?
Yes. Yep. And actually, that's something I didn't catch when I started counting. I was like, wait a second, the preliminary was for 29. This is showing 30. What happened?
Is it
So
possible to go back to 29?
it will go back to 29. Yep.
Excellent, that takes care of our tree issue.
So that should take care of the tree issue.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that we'll be back to the, in the preliminary, as it was, 342 significant trees on site. 193 of them were proposed for removal per that tree plan, which I believe is about a 56% removal based on that division of the numbers. So we'll be closer to that.
And Pat, the conditions that you listed earlier, does that encompass everything we just discussed, bring it back to 29 lots and?
Right, I would add the condition that it goes back to 29 lots.
Perfect, thank you.
And that's our intent. So
Okay.
it was
And
an
bring
honest,
their permit back and.
it was an honest mistake.
Oh, yeah. Any other questions? Anyone? Thank you.
Thank you.
So any thoughts, concerns before we bring up a motion for this?
I love the project. It's what the community needs. It's a great product. I think the price point's going to hit a great point in our
What
community.
is the price point?
Mid threes?
Yeah, mid-threes.
Probably closer to mid-threes.
Yeah. Fits in with that entire lake town over there. It's a nice project.
The product that our community needs. With the conditions that we discussed.
Right.
Going back to 29 lots, I think we're back on task where we were a couple months ago.
Absolutely.
Will this field drive cul-de-sac and cut into the trees as well at a future development time? Am I seeing that right?
Which one?
Field drive.
Right,
Looks like the tip of a cul-de-sac. Is it it'll take out some of those trees as well?
it will.
There's another one. There's a path that's going to go down.
Was that what area we talked about?
Connecting them.
There's a trail that
No.
connects the cul-de-sac.
Right.
But was there
It-
just, oh, excuse me, go ahead.
So the engineering looked at that, and it made more sense to reduce the retaining wall, to flip the field drive cul-de-sac. Originally, that cul-de-sac was on the other side when they didn't own this lot, this development, so that did change from the preliminary plat.
Do we see a variation of a plan that had a park at one time on All Lot C?
Well, they talked about having this named as a park. Our park structure would rather not be named as a park, but
Okay.
it would be city-owned,
Okay.
correct? And there'll be a trail that connects the two cul-de-sacs. I think that's what you're remembering.
Yes.
Pat, are they gonna put the trail in along County Road 11, or is that something that the city's gonna have to put in later?
Nope, that's the responsibility of the developer, along with the landscaping. Same thing with the streets. It's to be the responsibility of the developer to put in the streets, the sidewalks, the trails. And then for the new commissioners, our city engineer will be out there inspecting it, so it's up to city standards, and because we're gonna maintain them and own them over time.
Well, like John said, I think it's a good project. We approved it at the preliminary plat stage. As long as we can go back to where we were, I think it's a good project. You want to bring a motion up? Do we have a
Oh,
motion?
yeah, it's.
wanna bring it up for us?
Staff report. I don't have it written
No?
out.
It says, motion to recommend to city council approval of the Lake Town 12th final plat for a 29-lot detached villa subdivision, subject to the following conditions, which 1 through 6.
With, yeah, then adding the condition that it is limited to 29 lots as was referenced in the motion.
So is that an official motion from
I so
Mary Jo?
move.
Second, do we have a second? Do we have a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? No? With that, motion moves forward.
We'll try to get on the next city council meeting, depends on
Timing.
Staff timing, yep.
Thank you. Okay, rolling through. Public hearing, impervious surface coverage. Paul, is that yours? No.
Not
You
me.
sent out the email. I thought for sure you were going to get. Patrick.
So the planning commission discussed this on December 18th, 2018. And a few of the instances, staff has allowed homeowners in the past to exceed the maximum impervious surface limit in order to install a swimming pool, but they always had a condition that any excess over the minimum, maximum requirement had to be pervious pavers. Some cities that I included a list of all the cities in the area with hardcover, what they allow and what they don't allow. Some cities don't have any limits on hardcover. They just basically limit the setbacks of homes. We're on the more restrictive side of things because of the wetlands and because of the lakes. The Planning Commission, when you reviewed this back in December 18th, you favored keeping the total lot coverage maximum at 35%, but thought changing the definition was appropriate of what hardcover lot coverage is. The existing definition of lot coverage is that a surface composed of any material that impedes or prevents natural infiltration of fluid into soil. Impervious surfaces shall include, but are not limited to, roofs, patios, driveways, sidewalks, parking areas, and accessory structures. Wooden slatted decks on the surface and the surface area of a swimming pool shall be considered pervious. The proposed definition is the area of a lot occupied by buildings, accessory structures in excess of 120 square feet, parking areas, and all paved and gravel surfaces. Buildings shall be measured at the outer edge of the foundation line. Lot coverage shall not include projections for bay windows, permeable walkways, example flagstone, swimming pools, fences, walls, and open pattern decks and stairways that are installed over a permeable surface, I think. And some of the reasons why that staff is recommending this is that when somebody comes in with so building permits, I believe under 220 square feet or less, they don't need a building permit. So if you put a shed in and it's under 220 square feet, you don't need a permit. You don't need anything from the city, except we need to verify that you're not over the maximum hardcover. To do that, we require a survey. So what staff's intent was to allow smaller sheds, 10 by 20, 10 by 12, 120 square feet. You can install those, or even a dog kennel or dog house, and you don't have to get a survey to do that. So allowing some of these smaller sheds or dog houses without requiring somebody to pay for a survey, we thought that was appropriate. We're changing the definition from roof cover to foundation cover because when you look at a survey, they don't count the roof cover, they count the foundation, and that's one of the changes that we're suggesting. And then what we're suggesting is allowing like flagstones for walkways. If somebody wants to put in a flagstone walkway that has grass in between, that wouldn't count towards impervious surface. We're trying to be a little more flexible than what had the previous definition. And then I have a where is that? Where would it be? Planning Commission. I know where I put it. Hang on a second. So this was the last. This was included in the last meeting in Planning Commission in December, and it's included in the ordinance, proposed ordinance that was in your staff report. It's basically a diagram that kind of explains what's permitted and what's counted for hardcover and what's not. With that, I'll take any questions. This is a public hearing. They'll also have to open as well.
Any discussion first? Questions?
So, the picture you have here, are stones or pavers that are filled in with sand in between, are impervious.
Correct.
That's different than a flagstone that has no sort of connective tissue.
Correct. Right. That would be the intent, is to have grass in between the flagstones, so it's not,
Water can get.
yeah. So it would be considered pervious.
Do these same ratios apply to commercial properties?
No, that's a very good question. A lot of our commercial properties have, especially in the downtown, have no maximum impervious surface requirements. But on the other hand, they also have stormwater requirements for the commercial properties. So again, this is for the new commissioners, but when they do propose a residential development, the engineers will look at the total hardcover and size ponds accordingly. And so they don't have, each lot doesn't have to have their own little pond. But in the downtown, I think they're allowed 100% hardcover, but they have to have stormwater requirements for each lot.
Any other questions? Comments before we open the public
So
hearing?
it's just a change in definition.
That's the main thing, yeah. We talked about changing the total hardcover, but the planning commission thought 35% was appropriate.
If we talked about, there's a lot of new product out there that is cosmetically appealing, that is pervious, that can be used. You see a lot of commercial applications, like Laura brought up. Total Wine has done a really good job with their parking lot. There's also a lot of product that looks pervious, it's impervious. I just put a paver patio in my backyard and I use polymeric sand that takes my paver patio, makes it impervious. So it really gets this fuzzy gray area with all the new technology coming in, what's pervious, what's impervious. So defining this definition is actually good for us.
Yeah, and I think if they talk about it here, because a lot of that new impervious stuff, it does require maintenance also. A lot of maintenance. Has to
Pretty
be
heavy
cleaned.
maintenance.
Yeah, yeah, more so. I know I'm on the Carver County Water Management Organization group also, and they're doing a lot. We're doing a lot with Waconia, and yeah, that has to be professionally power washed. I think it's 3 times a year.
3 times a year.
Yeah, there's some maintenance.
Yeah, it's kind of an unfortunate situation, but of course the runoff, and what's going into the pond out here or ending up in Minnetonka, that's the issue.
Yeah.
And that really has to be addressed, so this is a method certainly of accomplishing that.
And it's one thing for allowing pervious pavers or requiring pervious pavers for commercial projects, because the Minnetonka Creek Watershed District or Carver County Watershed District would actually police that. It's another thing to allow them for offsetting hardcover in residential, because nobody polices it. And that's one of the things we're recommending, just eliminating that as a possibility, and basically if somebody has to go over the hardcover, then they have to come back and ask for a variance from the city council.
I'm kind of curious about this pervious concept with the 13 and a half acres. You're really close to the Three Rivers area, and if there's a way that the water could be filtered better before it reaches, I mean, obviously I know that there's stormwater ponds underneath. For example, Chaska, the parking lot in front of, so you have Home Depot and the property, it's a newer construction property that's to the east. There's a pain clinic, there's a Fresenius blood, that whole parking lot is pervious pavers. So I'm curious the rationale on that. Why did they choose to do that there? I know that the developer didn't want to pay for those pavers. They were forced to do that. So I'm just curious the background on why that's chosen to do there versus in other commercial developments that we may have here.
A lot of it, so it comes down to ordinance requirements and then guidelines and then any type of leverage that you have.
Okay.
So leverage meaning you're rezoning a property or you're given TIF. For example, across the street, the city had leverage because they're providing the financial support. So you can see the previous pavers, before you get to the street on that project. And then even on the north side or the south side of that parking lot, it is that kind of pervious pavement. So it's not the pervious pavers, but it's a pervious pavement. So there's a sign out there saying that trucks can't go halfway past there because of the type of pavement that it's being installed. And you could, I sit out there, so I kind of always watch the water. And it's doing a pretty effective job of limiting the amount of water that comes into the street. Actually, it's doing a very effective job.
Similar to your point, we have other projects I've seen that are similar to that is some of the projects have places for stormwater and some want more buildings to give up the stormwater management ponding, and they build that stormwater management within the hard surface
Okay.
to take care of that issue. Look at, I want to say Lifetime. They have a whole water management system underneath the parking lot.
Sure.
It's just a matter of how they're going to use the land and what kind of structure
Yeah,
they're going to land
that's a good point.
to satisfy all of our facility requirements.
Well, then there's the cost of the underground.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
What's the expected differential in life expectancy between the pervious? For example, in a parking lot and just a regular paved parking lot. I would think in this climate, that would be an awful lot of water that's getting below the surface that could really cause some problems.
It's not, it's about the same life expectancy because you're creating a sub base that's a lot deeper and it actually drains through. And so, over the life of the time, it's about equal. It's a different matrix of mix that they put in, and supports the freeze-thaw cycles that we have had. It's been used in the Twin Cities for probably over 15 years in different spots. And it has held up very well, as long as it's maintained. I mean, there's, eventually, if you don't maintain it, it becomes impermeable because it plugs up and you have to police the fact that, you have to sweep it or vacuum it or make sure it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. So some of the earlier pavements have failed and are now considered impervious. And different cities have started to replace them. And that's probably the main cause that would cause them to fail, would be the fact that they weren't maintained properly.
Makes sense.
Thank you, Jeff. It's a great explanation, and John's a great point, and Pat brought up a great point earlier. All these products are fantastic as long as we have some sort of police power to manage time enough to do it. So let's say we approve a project with an impervious asphalt because it's an awesome product, it works well. 10 years from now when it fails, what's to stop Scott from coming in and just doing a regular overlay of regular asphalt? So then it's just a matter of, we can put these ordinance rules in place, but how do we manage it 10, 15, 20 years down the road? And maybe it's not an issue, maybe it is an issue, I don't know. Just something to think about. Cause
Yeah, policing would be the problem, wouldn't it?
that's pretty much anything we do. Not that Scott would ever do that.
No, I would never do that. Do we open a meeting when we have an empty room?
You still have to open the public hearing and then close
So
it.
we will now open this portion of the meeting up for a public hearing. Seeing no one, I will make a motion that we close the public hearing. Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Nay? No? So we will close the public hearing. Any final thoughts, discussion, before we make a motion?
I think it's a really good solution. It cleans it up,
Yeah. Which is
no
what-
question about
Yeah,
it.
we need to clean.
It's good.
I don't have it in front of me, the motion. Anyone? Is it as simple as
Yep.
make a motion, the staff recommends that the city council adopt a new definition for impervious surface?
That's it?
Do I have a second?
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion moves forward. Now we get to the fun stuff, right? I gotta move back here.
Mr. Jerry, doing a great job.
It's gonna get better, I promise.
Doing awesome.
I promise.
Taking the role.
You're doing great.
You're
Thank
doing
you, thank
excellent.
you.
You're breaking all speed records.
That is true. I'm not so sure that's my effect, but, so, we usually, we have a list that's sent out, and we take turns attending or watching the city council meetings. And then so whoever watches that will give an update to all of us. So I think we have 2 to look forward to tonight, if I read this right. City council meeting on the 25th and April 8th. I don't know who's presenting, but can we start with the 25th?
Sure.
Or
22nd. There's that's city council, isn't it?
well, so we have 2 that we're going to report on. The first was the March 25th meeting. Did anyone attend that? Because Patrick can always give us an update.
Right, I go to all the council
I know.
meetings, so I usually can.
Are we gonna continue where we are?
It's something we could talk about.
Okay, we'll talk about it.
I think it'd be helpful if we could assign some folks. That's okay. Because then I will make sure that I get it done.
We had that, we had it assigned last year. I guess we're in a new year and we've been a little more free flow so
Right.
far, but I thought that was kind of helpful too.
Okay, I mean, you guys can watch them or come to them if you want, or
Right.
otherwise I'm usually there if there's a planning related item. So it's up to you guys.
One thing I'd like to see, and then we'll touch on miscellaneous, go ahead.
Yeah, we'll talk about it later. Go ahead for
Okay.
today.
So, there's 2 city council meetings between the last planning commission meeting now. On March 25th, they talked about the 4 vacant lots that was in front of the planning commission. One of the reasons why it was before the planning commission, for the new commissioners, is that the planning commission, by state statute, has to make a finding that it is being consistent of selling that lot before you sell any publicly owned property. So there's 4 lots. The planning commission looked at them and said, yeah, these are all consistent with the comprehensive plan. There's one up on Smithtown Road that is right now designated as a park. And one of the findings of the planning commission was that if the Park and Rec Commission and the city council ultimately decides that that area is not needed for a park, then using it as a single-family lot would be consistent with the comprehensive plan. So with that, the city council directed staff to do some more investigation on those 4 lots and to bring it back a proposal to the city council on how we can sell those 4 lots. Part of the process will be having a open house with all the neighbors that surround those 4 lots so that they are aware of the city is thinking about selling these lots. The other item that the city council discussed was the steep slope ordinance. They finally approved it. So basically it's saying any slopes that are 18% or greater that have that are wooded, full of woods, will not be preserved. Will be preserved. And essentially, what that is that it's for the areas that aren't developed, so the farmlands. And historically, farmers did not till property that had a slope to 18% or greater. So that's why you'd find a lot of the old growth trees in those areas, and they usually use them for pasture lands. So what this is saying is that in development, when we're reviewing the development, if we look at slopes that are 18% or greater, and if there's trees on there, they should be preserved. But it's not only saving the trees, it's also saving the hillsides. So if you remember at the Planning Commission meeting, at least I remember it, one of the township ladies came up and said, can't we do anything to stop these developers from flattening all those hills that make up the character of Lake Town Township and the city of Victoria? And so this is what another attempt of doing that is, not only preserving the trees, but also preserving those hillsides for future residents. So they approved that. They also directed staff to look at, as the mayor alluded to earlier tonight, look at the shoreline ordinance, the tree preservation ordinance, and then the landscaping ordinance to make sure that they're consistent with each other, which we will. On April 8th, the city council looked at a number of planning commission related items.
Pat, quick question.
Yes.
Do any of, we talked about a couple of the upcoming developments. Do any of those have steep slope issues?
So there are some along County Road 11 that do include steep slopes, but they had been reviewing or designing these developments before I even started here back in June of last year. So what we did was we said these would be exempt from the steep slope ordinance, to be fair, because the ordinance wasn't in effect when they started designing them. But otherwise, those are the only ones. And we'll still work with the developers to try to preserve as many of those slopes as possible.
The 13 and a half acres, that'll be effective, won't it?
Right. Yep.
Yeah, that's got a pretty steep one. That
Right.
definitely is over 18%.
Right. So we'll take a look at that as well. And again, that saving those trees, I always encourage developers to save the trees because it makes a significant impact when they put a new development, either a commercial development or a residential development. It's like an automatic buffer that you don't have to wait 100 years for trees to grow. So,
Or brings up a great point, that 13-acre parcel out there that was started ahead of time, prior to new ordinance. Are they exempt? Are they included? And how does that impact the current sketch plat?
well, we'll take a look at it again, making sure that the development is designed appropriately. I mean, if it makes sense to remove some trees because of something, it's very difficult. And that's one of the reasons why we do PUDs, because every site is unique. And it's very challenging to have a straight ordinance that covers all the different situations that will come in front of the Planning Commission and City Council.
That'll be a piece that'll get flattened.
What's that?
That's the piece that's going to get flattened
Yeah, it might.
for that to work.
Right.
Current plan.
Like a lot, right? I mean, yeah.
So the April 8th City Council meeting.
So back to John's question, they are technically grandfathered into under the old rules. Is that so? They're not, at least initially,
Not
affected by.
the downtown west.
They're not.
No, they're not grandfathered in. The only ones that are grandfathered in were the ones along County Road 11. Yep. So the D.R. Horton and then the Welter property. They specifically called out those properties in the
What's the
ordinance.
difference between those and this one in terms of why?
Well-
Is it just timing, basically, or?
Well, the ones that the developers around County Road 11 had been coming up with the concept plan, again, way before June, before I even started. The developers on the downtown west, they didn't start reviewing it until in November. And they haven't even proposed a concept plan. They're still trying to figure out a development process. So the developers along County Road 11 were much farther along in their design process than these developers. So the Bethesda rezoning, it was overwhelmingly supported, and that is different than the TIF. The TIF would go to the city council at their meeting on Monday. And again, it's something that the TIF is not reviewed by the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission reviews the land use applications, the variance, the rezoning, and the rezoning was just a strip of, I think, a 50-foot strip. And then I think that's it. Oh, and the plat was the final one too. So small area plan. This is something that the Planning Commission back in January, February, we looked at your goals for the next 2 years, this year and for 2020. And one of the goals that you guys came up with in 2020 was to come up with some design guidelines for the office commercial park south of the railroad tracks.
Yep.
Well, there's going to be a sewer and utilities going down this, most likely this year, to the railroad tracks. As soon as that happens, and probably even before then, developers are going to be approaching the city staff of what can we develop south of the railroad tracks.
And where is this exactly? Can you put it on a map?
Yep.
Kind of by those properties we talked about that are getting grandfathered in, right?
It's Engler and Victoria Drive.
County Road 11, County Road 10.
Yep.
That development there, just drive it.
Basically, Victoria Drive south, you get the railroad tracks right there, where we go across 100 times.
Yep.
That piece all the way down to Engler.
That's fine, I got it, thanks.
I think
So here's County Road 11, Jersey Avenue, and then there's the railroad tracks. So it's everything south of that. Essentially, it's our only industrial, office, commercial area. And what staff is recommending is to move up those design guidelines from 2020 to this year. But not only do the design guidelines, but do a small area plan, similar to the downtown small area plan in 2016. And basically what that is taking the comprehensive plan policies to make it even more specific to this area. And so the other key about doing a small area plan is that we'd be working with developers of commercial, developers of office, developers of industrial, and to really figure out what is going to be coming to us. So we have a better understanding of what the market is going to be producing. Or, I mean, are we going to get 8-story apartment or office buildings? If we say that's what we want, but the market is saying we're not going to get it, we want to know that. And so when somebody comes in for a self-storage unit, and it's the first thing right out of the bat, but we got people saying, no, you don't. We're going to have office buildings, 4-story office buildings is a market for this area. We can easily tell the guy from the office storage or the storage, self-storage, we don't need you. We don't want you. So that's why a small area plan is helpful. The other thing about a small area plan is helpful is that you have a discussion with potential developers themselves. You get them interested. So that's one of our recommendations. The city council liked the idea. They wanted us to go out and get quotes from a couple planning consultants and bring that back to them.
What consultants, just out of curiosity?
We haven't narrowed down to them. I have to reach out to them, but of course, Hoyson and Kohler would be one. Lux Engineering Planning would be another, and possibly a third. Small city wireless ordinance is something that went to the Planning Commission. I'll let Paul give an update on it.
Yeah, so we were able to pass the small cell wireless, and so that's really important for 5G connectivity, increased Internet of Things, and other types of technologies that will be evolving as the connection increases. We did include some provisions for conditional use for these particular antennas and wireless structures in residential districts and in the downtown business district because it's an important area that we protect, and we have careful eyes on that. In addition to that, we got council guidance to develop a design standard for these poles, and so that's included. It's on the website now. Some of the controversies and some of the photos they shared last time, it can look really good, and it can look really bad. And so we made sure to develop some standards in coordination with the city of Northfield and some other cities to develop standards that are really appealing. A lot of these also come from Denver as well, which spent a lot of time and a lot of work making a very invitable downtown. So you'll be seeing those hopefully in positive ways in the future. And again, although it might not occur tomorrow, like we might not get a T-Mobile or Verizon to come in with a small cell tomorrow, it's going to happen sooner or later. And so it's good to be prepared for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
They also adopted the zoning map. So again, when the city went to straight zoning a couple years ago and they changed the zoning districts, they never officially adopted the zoning map, so they did that. Marsh Lake Road improvements. The council heard from the neighbors, and they basically directed staff to look at 3 different options. One option of having a city street and paving it basically where it's aligned now. Another option, Scott, you can help me out here. Another option would be to do what the county was suggesting. And then the third option is?
A combination thereof.
A combination thereof, is it?
Saying if the county could possibly stage it,
Right.
more than anything, it's always been the county, and county wants to just overbuild.
Yep.
And so there's some direction to staff to, let's consider, maintaining the road. I mean, we're gonna make improvements, but we're not gonna change it. We'll leave the road the way it is. So,
What is the, if I could, what is the argument against having a bike path there, or trail, bike path, running, pedestrian path, et cetera?
Well,
I understand all of it,
yeah,
that's the only part I don't really get.
well, if we're gonna maintain the exact road the way it is now, there's really not space for a bike path. And I love bike path. I spend my life on a bike. I think a bike would be great, but it is a bike path like so many that we have that goes nowhere. There'd be no connection to it. And just behind us in the new neighborhoods, there is a connection of a bike path, which goes all the way through, and it connects, like we were talking earlier, it does connect up. So there is a bike path for the development already. The fact is, Marsh Lake, the development to the south is it's farmers, and it's the Marsh Lake Hunt Club, which is years from now, probably 20 years from now. So
In terms of developing, you mean?
developing. So there's not going to be any more use for that road. There's really not a significant use for a bike path there even at this point. There will be in the future. But right now, I guess what we're just saying is it fiscally and for what really, it's what's right for the city. It's just to make it a safe road. It needs improvements. Well, let's put it exactly where it is and at least consider the cost. It could come back, this is going to cost a fortune, and then county, go do your thing.
Right.
But we finally are going to get a chance to compare apples to apples.
But it would seem as though one of the real key things is that it will become a need at some point, 20 years down the road,
Well,
probably.
that's a good question because, I mean, I could go on this forever. In the original, if you go back to Carver County's, back 20 years, there was going to be a connection. Pioneer Trail from Eden Prairie was going to go all the way to Waconia. Well, the condensed version is Chaska put a stop to that when right at the corner of Bavaria, if you're going to Home Depot, where the two roundabouts are, where the railroad tracks are, there was originally going to be a bridge going over that railroad track. The only way you're going to have a kind of a high-speed thoroughfare, if you will, is you're going to have to address that railroad tracks. They're not going to do that, and they're never going to do that. They put the roundabouts in. They essentially made that thoroughfare a 35-mile-an-hour road. And the other end of Marsh Lake Road is essentially a dead end. I mean, there's a marsh there. It's going to be extremely difficult to go over. And Randy Maluchnik, our county commissioner, I've heard him say more than once that road will never happen. So there are certain people say, "Oh, it's going to happen." No one knows if that's going to happen. And for at least 20 more years, Marsh Lake Road is essentially a dead end road.
I think it is a classic case of, so take a drive out there. For anyone who hasn't been there, take a drive out there.
Not now. Your car's going to bottom out. But
But, you know, it's, you know, I had heard all about it, and so my wife and I drove out there. And, you know, we had the, you know, I don't want to say that I became completely convinced of what was said at the last city council meeting by the homeowners.
Yeah.
But, well, it would appear to be true.
Well, the other thing, as you're looking at the land, the other thing which people don't understand is all the farming that's done on Marsh Lake Road. We have one farm on, you know, the Schmeek farm on the,
Sure.
but the Marsh Lake Hunt Club is where most of the farming happens. There's 3 farmers that farm all that hay. They take care of the corn, and they come from both ends. They come from either side of Marsh Lake Road. And I've explained this to them too. When you have a tractor and you're cutting hay and you have a wagon to bale it, that's over 60 feet.
Yep.
And these are slow-moving vehicles, and Marsh Lake Hunt Club isn't going to go anywhere. This is our future. 4 lanes or 2 lanes with center medians, it just doesn't work. I'm done. That was miscellaneous.
So the last item was downtown west. So the developers came to the city council and they made a proposal to, basically they want to be the project manager for the development. And so the city council, we recommended the city council not adopt any or form of management. We want to vet that process out first, staff. And so staff is going to meet with our city attorney and our financial consultant, city engineer, and discuss this type of a process, and then meet with the developers to talk about it a little bit more. But the one thing that we did have the city council do, and they approved, was coming up with some more parameters of what that development's going to be like. Because we can probably sell that to a bunch of senior housing, and it would develop in a heartbeat. But I don't think that was the vision. So what staff did was say, is this vision consistent, the city council, is this vision consistent with what the community wanted? And that one of them was to limit the amount of senior housing to no more than 25%. And it had to be active senior housing, so it wasn't being for people with Alzheimer's and things like that. And another thing is just keeping the streets active. So retail and services were a primary use, and then the secondary use would be residential. And a number of other things too that I'll send you the staff report as well afterwards. But anyways, they approved it. So they gave the developer and the staff a little more parameters for our negotiations. So with that, that's all I have.
So side note, that same piece, remember that little square on the east side of the 13.5 acres?
Yeah.
That was kind of exempt. That just hit the market a couple of days ago for $523.
Oh, it
just
did?
in case you're wondering.
Really?
Under commercial.
Which,
Pat, can you just elaborate a little bit more on the management aspect? You kind of lost me there. So are you saying that, could you just elaborate on that?
Sure. So what they're proposing is that they would be kind of like the project manager of finding developers, bringing it to the developers, to the city. For example, they'd have parcel A. They'd go out and find 2 or 3 developers, bring those developers to the city, and the city would say, okay, we want this developer to develop at this price. And then they would get a 10% cut of that. So that's part that we want to discuss a little bit more. And unfortunately, they made that proposal to staff Wednesday, the day before the packet went out to city council, and that's why we're not going to have the city council say yes or no, or even make comments. We were just recommending the city council discuss the parameters of the development in the first place.
So those those drawings that we've seen of that, those are not really real then.
Well, they're not even concept plans, but it's their vision.
Right.
And I think that the vision, and especially the architect, is a great vision for that development. They talk about, I've seen his developments, DGR architects in the past, and done it elsewhere in Edina and in Minneapolis, and he designs it so that the first floor is residential at first, because that's what the market is saying. But then he's designed it so that you can retrofit those to service or retail as the market changes. It's a very interesting design.
It was cool.
Are they under contract?
Well, they are. One of the things what we would like them to do, what we need to get them to do, is to put in an escrow so that it covers staff's time. So, right. We recommend to the council that we continue working with them, but we want to vet out the process.
Thank you.
Anything else? Any announcements? Miscellaneous? I have one question. Well, go ahead, Mary Jo.
Last time I miscellaneous about having community gardens, and I found out we do have them, which I didn't realize. There are, I forget how many plots, and it's over near the rec center. Really? So that, you can put your dahlias over, they have one left, I think, one lot left. One plot left. And yes, they would like to have some additional community gardens. And I personally think it might be nice to discuss with the architect for the 13.5 acres if they could put community gardens on the north side.
On the Carver,
They
kind of a
have
buffer, it almost
Yeah,
kind of help.
yeah, they have the steps going down into, I don't know how deep our ownership of that is, but that would be a good place for them.
I think I know the perfect chairperson for that.
I do.
Do I hear a second? Make a motion that we adjourn or just adjourn?
Somebody makes.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. No nays? Meeting adjourned.
Great job.